This book is called Happy Haunting Amelia Bedelia by Herman Parrish with pictures by Lynn Sweat. Amelia Bedelia is one of my favorite characters to read about. She always mixes things up. The question is, will Halloween drive Amelia Bedelia batty? Let's read and find out. When Amelia Bedelia arrived for work, she could not believe her eyes. "Oh my gosh," said Amelia Bedelia. "What has happened to the house?" Look at her surprised face. Oh, look what she means. What's in front of the house? There's all these gravestones. They say, "Boo! I said I was sick. Good riddance. Oh no. I'll be right back. Uh-oh. Drop dead, okay. Boo to you. It's dark in here. Scram. Still coughing. Boo. Go away. Scram." And all the spider webs, the jack-o'-lantern, and the bats. "This is terrible," said Amelia Bedelia. "Mr. and Mrs. Rogers must need me. Someone has ruined their house." She ran to the front door. "Ah!" yelled Amelia Bedelia. "Help!" Mr. and Mrs. Rogers rushed outside. "Hold still," said Mrs. Rogers. "I will get the bats out of your belfry." "Ha!" said Mr. Rogers. "That would be a full-time job. She has made me bats for years." That means she drives him crazy. "You are untangled, Amelia Bedelia," said Mrs. Rogers. "Come inside and relax." "Wow," said Amelia Bedelia. "Who wrecked your house?" "We did," said Mrs. Rogers. "We are getting ready for Halloween." "Is that tonight?" said Amelia Bedelia. "How did you forget?" said Mr. Rogers. "Those bats on the front porch must have made you batty." Look at the signs they put up. Bat room instead of bathroom. The dungeon, that must be for their basement. Haunted hallway. Doorway to doom. Skeletons only. "Sorry," said Amelia Bedelia. "I have been very busy. I was at school helping children make their costumes." "Good for you," said Mrs. Rogers. "We invited all of our neighbors for a Halloween party. And you too. Tonight, the best costume wins a prize." "Gosh," said Amelia Bedelia, "your house looks so spooky." "Thank you," said Mrs. Rogers. "The spookier the better." "That is the idea," said Mr. Rogers. "What fun," said Amelia Bedelia. "I will help you clean up." "No, you don't," said Mr. Rogers. "I worked hard to get this place to look shabby." "Then I will help you mess up," said Amelia Bedelia. "What should I do first?" "Hand me that hammer," said Mr. Rogers. "But first, crack a window. It has gotten very warm in here." Now remember, I told you that Amelia Bedelia mixes things up quite a bit. She takes things very literally. Watch what she does. Oh no! Crash! "Uh-oh," said Amelia Bedelia. "I tried to just crack it, but it broke instead." She used the hammer on the window. "Amelia Bedelia," said Mr. Rogers, "I meant open the window a bit." "It is open," said Amelia Bedelia. "There are lots of bits and pieces." "It's not your fault, dear," said Mrs. Rogers. "Besides, that broken window makes our house look truly haunted." Mr. Rogers shook his head and said, "I think you both have gone batty." "What is next?" asked Amelia Bedelia. "Let's see," said Mrs. Rogers. "A lot of people are coming tonight. We should add a leaf to the table." "A leaf?" said Amelia Bedelia. "Yes, of course," said Mrs. Rogers. "A leaf or two makes the table larger." "Do you know where to find the leaves?" "Of course I do," said Amelia Bedelia. Do you know what that means, adding a leaf to the table? But it's not what Amelia Bedelia thinks. "Before you go," said Mr. Rogers, "please hand me that witch." "That witch what?" said Amelia Bedelia. "Not what," said Mr. Rogers. "Which." "Which what?" said Amelia Bedelia. "Not which what," said Mr. Rogers. "That witch there, with the pointy hat." Amelia Bedelia held up two witches. "They both have pointy hats," she said. "Which witch do you want?" "Whichever," said Mr. Rogers. "No, I mean whatever witch. Which, oh, skip it. Just get those leaves." Amelia Bedelia skipped away. "Good thing it is fall," said Amelia Bedelia. "I can get lots of leaves for the table." She saw something wriggle under a leaf. "Sorry, Mr. Worm, but back you go," she said. "Yoo-hoo!" called Mrs. Rogers from the kitchen window. "There is no time to do yard work. I need your help." Amelia Bedelia went inside. "There we go," said Amelia Bedelia. "Now the table looks smaller to me, but it is so much prettier. Mrs. Rogers always has great ideas." Amelia Bedelia went into the kitchen. Mrs. Rogers didn't mean add leaves from trees to the table. She meant pull the table apart and add, it's called a leaf, to the table. You might have a table like that at your house. We do. "There you are," said Mrs. Rogers. "You are so creative with food. Let's cook up some gruesome goodies." "Goody," said Amelia Bedelia. "This worm casserole needs more spaghetti." Cranberry juice makes a tasty vampire punch." "Crumble up cookies for the kitty litter cake." "We need more eyeballs." See what they're using for eyeballs? Grapes. "I'll peel another bunch of grapes. Dried apricots make delicious ears." There was a knock at the kitchen door. "Trick or treat," said Cousin Alkaloo. "I do not know any tricks," said Amelia Bedelia, "but you can sample some treats." "Thank you," said Cousin Alkaloo. Mr. Rogers walked into the kitchen. "Something smells good," he said. "Well, it sure isn't me," said Cousin Alkaloo. "I have been working very hard. I harvested a load of pumpkins for the party tonight." "How generous," said Mr. Rogers. "Do you know how to carve jack-o'-lanterns?" "I did one," said Cousin Alkaloo. He showed them his pumpkin. "That face looks very familiar," said Amelia Bedelia. Look very closely at the face. What do you think it looks like? Do you think it looks like Mr. Rogers? Look at the mustache and the nose. I think it looks just like him. Mrs. Rogers tried not to laugh. "Very funny," said Mr. Rogers, "but that pumpkin is too handsome. Have you got anything scarier?" "Wait here," said Cousin Alkaloo. He went out to his truck. Cousin Alkaloo returned with the scariest scarecrow ever. "Meet Oswald," said Cousin Alkaloo. "He scares away birds for miles." "Ooh," said Mrs. Rogers. "He sends shivers down my spine. Oswald can sit here for tonight." Ooh. If he sends shivers down her spine, that means that she's a little scared or spooked by it. "He doesn't scare me," said Mr. Rogers. "I do not know the meaning of the word fear." "You don't?" said Amelia Bedelia. The word fear is in the dictionary. I will look it up for you. Show me later, said Mr. Rogers. I must get my costume ready. I am going to be a circus strongman. And I am going to be a queen, said Mrs. Rogers. Amelia Bedelia, what is your costume going to be? Gee, said Amelia Bedelia, I do not have a costume. Sure you do, said Mr. Rogers. You wear a costume every day. Mrs. Rogers glared at her husband. That means she gave him a look like this. What do you mean, said Amelia Bedelia. These are my clothes, not a costume. I have always dressed like this. Mr. Rogers was poking fun at her clothing. Mr. Rogers felt bad about what he had said. He was too embarrassed to say anything. Come along, Amelia Bedelia, said Mrs. Rogers. I have an idea for you and for Cousin Alkaloo. See you tonight, said Mr. Rogers. Amelia Bedelia did not reply. How was she feeling? A little bit sad. Woo! Creak! That night, as darkness fell, the house really did look haunted. Spooky music with scary sounds made it even more fun. Floorboards creaked, chains rattled, moans and groans filled the air. Clanty, clank, clunk. Aye! The doorbell rang. Our first trick-or-treaters, said Mrs. Rogers. Would you get the front door, dear? Yes, Your Majesty, said Mr. Rogers. As soon as he was out of sight, Mrs. Rogers ran to the back door. While Mr. Rogers handed out treats at the front door, Mrs. Rogers let in a trick at the back door. Do you recognize that from earlier in the story? Right this way, said Mr. Rogers. Thank you, said a skeleton. I was dying to come in. The party food was a big hit. Care for an eyeball? Said a girl to her dad. Yuck, he said. Yum, she said. They are good and disgusting. Try some finger food, said Mr. Rogers. Oh, cool, said the boy. These cookies have little fingers. See, they're like hands. They were Amelia Bedelia's idea, said Mr. Rogers. Where is she? Asked the boy. Good question, said Mr. Rogers. Where do you think Amelia Bedelia went? May I have 2 cups of blood? Asked a girl. My pleasure, said Mrs. Rogers. Remember, that's the cranberry juice. I love your costumes. Amelia Bedelia helped us, said a little boy. Wonderful, said Mrs. Rogers. Maybe you will win the prize. Have you seen Amelia Bedelia? Asked Mr. Rogers. Not yet, said Mrs. Rogers. She might not come, thanks to you. What did I do wrong? Said Mr. Rogers. You know, said Mrs. Rogers, you made fun of her clothes. I feel terrible, said Mr. Rogers. I will apologize when I see her. Just then, Mr. Rogers shuddered. That means he did a little shiver. What is wrong? Said Mrs. Rogers. It sounds silly, said Mr. Rogers. That scarecrow gives me the creeps. Scaredy cat, said Mrs. Rogers. It looks alive, said Mr. Rogers. I feel like it is watching me. Ding dong! Mr. Rogers jumped. Relax, said Mrs. Rogers. You are imagining things. Go and see who is at the door. Mr. Rogers opened the door. He smiled a big smile. Well, well, he said, I have never been so glad to see a ghost. Do come in, Amelia. Miss Ghost. Woo, said the ghost as it floated into the house. Do you see why he thinks that's Amelia Bedelia? Look at the shape, especially up here at the top of the head. It looks like Amelia Bedelia wearing her bonnet. Mr. Rogers was a perfect host. Care for refreshments, he asked. The ghost shook its head no. Well, said Mr. Rogers, would you like to judge our costume contest? The ghost nodded yes. Attention, everyone, said Mrs. Rogers. It is time for our Halloween contest. Anyone who wishes to compete for the prize, step right this way. I am Sunny Day, your TV weatherman. I forecast that I will win. Look at his coat. It has different types of weather on it. You can't beat peace and love. This hippie has the grooviest T-shirt and bell bottoms. So she has tea bags attached to her shirt and bells attached to her bottoms for a T-shirt and bell bottoms. If I win, I will still be in a pickle. If you're in a pickle, that means you're kind of in trouble. I am all eyes. Oh my goodness. I am all ears. And I am right one nose. Bravo, said Mrs. Rogers. Yes, said Mr. Rogers. I can tell that Amelia Bedelia helped them a lot. Too bad she could not be here tonight. He winked at Mrs. Rogers. Just then the clock struck 10. Okay, everyone, said Mrs. Rogers. Time to take off your masks. Uh-oh, said the ghost. It tried to slip away. Whoa there, said Mr. Rogers. It's time I put my foot down. Mr. Rogers stepped on the sheet. As the ghost kept walking, the sheet was pulled off to reveal... Cousin Alkaloo, said Mr. Rogers. Where is Amelia Bedelia? Cousin Alkaloo looked very afraid. He pointed behind Mr. Rogers. He opened his mouth to speak, but he was scared, speechless. Mr. Rogers wheeled around. So that was not Amelia Bedelia as the ghost under the sheet. That was the Cousin Alkaloo. Boo! Screamed the Scarecrow. Yeah! Yelled Mr. Rogers. He threw his barbell up in the air. Mr. Rogers turned around and ran right into Cousin Alkaloo. They both fell in a heap. Oh no. Happy Halloween, said Amelia Bedelia. Amelia Bedelia, said Mr. Rogers. Ha ha, said Cousin Alkaloo. I think you should call her Amelia Boo-Delia. As your queen, said Mrs. Rogers, I declare Amelia Bedelia is the winner for the best costume. Bravo! Hooray! Yippee! So the Scarecrow was Amelia Bedelia the whole time. The next day, Amelia Bedelia and Cousin Alkaloo came to help clean up. Great party, said Cousin Alkaloo. Thank you, said Mrs. Rogers. We will do it again next year. Start planning your costume now. I will, said Amelia Bedelia, but you have the best ideas. Those trick-or-treaters, said Mr. Rogers. Somebody piled leaves on our table. That was me, said Amelia Bedelia. That was lovely, said Mrs. Rogers. They made a beautiful centerpiece. That means a decoration placed in the center of the table. Mrs. Rogers showed Amelia Bedelia how to add a leaf to the table. "There we go," said Mrs. Rogers. "Now let's set the table for lunch." So see how they were able to pull the two ends of the table apart, and they put an extra piece in there to make it a bigger table. "Amelia Bedelia," said Mr. Rogers, "I apologize for what I said yesterday." "Apology accepted," said Amelia Bedelia. "Try some leftover worm casserole." Now remember, that's the spaghetti. Mr. Rogers took a huge portion. "This is very tasty," he said. "Glad you like it," said Amelia Bedelia. "I got worried yesterday when I ran out of spaghetti." "You ran out?" asked Mr. Rogers. He took a closer look at his food. "Then what is this?" said Mr. Rogers. "Lucky me," said Amelia Bedelia. "Every leaf I picked up in your yard had a fat, juicy worm under it." Oh, Mr. Rogers turned as green as a witch. Oh, I would too. "Trick or treat," said Amelia Bedelia, laughing. Looks like she got the last laugh. I hope you enjoyed this Halloween version of Amelia Bedelia.